The old man refused to walk through the forest after sunset. Nobody in the village laughed at him anymore. When he was younger, they called him superstitious, a man haunted by memories from a war that ended decades earlier. But after what happened on one winter night in 1961, people stopped mocking him, because he wasn't the only one who heard them. The marching. It always began the same way. First, silence. The kind of silence only deep forests know, where even the wind seems afraid to move. Then came a distant sound. Soft, rhythmic. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Like boots pressing into snow. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Slow at first. Then growing louder. Closer. As if an entire army was approaching through the darkness. The villagers living near old WW2 battlefields in the Ardennes region of Belgium had stories passed down for years. Stories about nights when strange noises drifted through forests where thousands of soldiers had died during the brutal Battle of the Bulge. Gunfire with no source. Voices shouting commands in languages no one nearby spoke anymore. And marching. Always marching. Most dismissed these as myths created by grief. After all, war leaves scars. Not only on land, but inside people. Entire generations grew up surrounded by ruins, abandoned bunkers, and memories too painful to discuss. Perhaps those memories transformed into legends. Or perhaps something else remained. The winter of 1944 had turned these forests into hell. Young soldiers, many barely adults, fought in freezing temperatures. Some died without ever seeing who shot them. Others vanished beneath artillery explosions. Many never returned home. Imagine thousands of terrified men spending their final moments surrounded by snow, smoke, and screams. Now imagine the place remembers. Years later, travelers moving through certain roads at night described hearing engines where no vehicles existed. Old military trucks, metal rattling, orders being shouted. Yet investigators found nothing. No footprints, no camps, only empty woods. One account told of a local hunter who entered the forest before sunrise. He expected deer. Instead, he heard distant movement, columns of men advancing. The sound echoed between trees. Military precision. Left, right, left, right. The hunter froze. The noise approached for several minutes. Then suddenly, silence. Not fading away, not retreating, gone, as though someone had switched off reality itself. He searched. Nothing. No soldiers. No people. Only untouched snow. The hunter reportedly stopped entering those woods alone. Stories like these spread slowly. Because in villages shaped by war, strange experiences often stayed private. People feared being called insane, until someone else admitted hearing the same thing. Then another. Then another. And soon whispered conversations formed patterns. Patterns historians sometimes struggle to explain. Not because ghosts were proven, but because human memory behaves strangely around places of extreme trauma. Psychologists have long studied how communities preserve fear. Battlefields become symbols. Symbols become myths. Myths survive generations. Yet some witnesses insisted myths couldn't explain what happened to them. One story describes travelers driving through forest roads decades after WW2. Late evening. Heavy fog. Their headlights suddenly illuminated figures ahead. Soldiers. Rows of them. Wearing old uniforms. Walking silently. The driver slowed. Confused. The figures appeared pale, almost transparent through the mist. Then, nothing. The road emptied. No footprints. No sound. The witnesses later argued over what they saw. Exhaustion? Fog? Shared illusion? No answer satisfied everyone. Because fear changes memory. But memory also preserves fear. That is why war stories never disappear. Even when guns stop firing. Even when survivors die. Something remains. Not necessarily spirits. Sometimes only echoes. And echoes can feel alive. Across Europe, abandoned bunkers from WW2 continue attracting explorers. Many enter searching for history. Some leave claiming they experience things impossible to explain. Cold spots. Whispers. Sudden dread. The overwhelming feeling of not being alone. Skeptics argue underground spaces distort sound. Old structures create strange acoustics. Reasonable explanations exist. Often they should be accepted. Yet people continue returning with new stories. Different places. Different decades. Same feeling. As though history waits quietly in darkness. Perhaps because humans struggle to believe tragedy simply ends. We want unfinished stories, mysteries, warnings. The idea that places remember those lost there. The forests surrounding old battlefields carry another mystery. Natural silence. Animals often avoid areas disturbed by humans. At night, silence becomes unsettling. Then every small sound grows larger. Branches breaking become footsteps. Wind becomes whispers. Fear fills gaps. And fear is powerful. Still, some accounts remain difficult to dismiss entirely. Not because they prove ghosts, but because witnesses described experiences before knowing local legends. The details matched. Marching, commands, gunfire, always war, always repeating, like a memory trapped in time. The old man from the village believed exactly that. Not ghosts, memories. He once said, "Wars don't end when treaties are signed. Some stay behind." Nobody knew whether he meant inside people or inside forests. Then came the night in 1961. The night several villagers claimed to hear the marching together. Not one witness, many. And what happened before sunrise would become one of the strangest stories ever whispered about those woods. Because according to them, the soldiers weren't only heard, they were seen. The first person to hear them was a farmer returning late. Winter had settled heavily over the Ardennes. Snow-covered abandoned trenches hidden beneath forests that had witnessed unimaginable violence during the Battle of the Bulge decades earlier. The road home was empty. No vehicles, no lights, only darkness and the sound of tires crushing frozen ground. Then the farmer noticed something strange. His horse became restless. Animals often sense danger before humans do. The horse slowed. Its breathing changed. Then it stopped completely, refused to move. The farmer climbed down, annoyed at first. He pulled the reins. Nothing. The animal stared toward the forest, frozen, as if watching something hidden between the trees. That was when he heard it. A distant rhythm. Soft, almost mistaken for wind. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Boots. Hundreds of boots. Moving together. The sound grew louder. Perfectly synchronized. Military. Disciplined. The farmer had been a child during the war. He remembered soldiers. He remembered fear. And suddenly those memories returned all at once. He stepped backward. The horse trembled violently. Then came another sound. Metal clattering. Equipment shifting. The unmistakable noise of an army on the move. The farmer later claimed voices followed. Shouted commands carried through darkness. Too distant to understand, yet undeniably human. He abandoned the cart. Ran toward the village. At first nobody believed him. Until others stepped outside. And heard it too. The marching. Old villagers reportedly exchanged uneasy looks. Because some recognized the sound immediately. Not from legends. From memory. WW2 survivors knew what armies sounded like at night. And according to stories passed through generations, this sounded real. People gathered near the edge of the village. Listening. The noise continued. Slowly approaching. Children were brought indoors. Doors locked. Windows closed. Fear spread faster than explanation. Then one witness claimed something impossible. Shapes. Moving among trees. Rows of figures. The village priest reportedly stared into darkness for several moments before speaking quietly. They looked like soldiers. No one moved closer. No one wanted to. Because wars teach people one lesson above all. Never walk toward approaching armies. The figures emerged gradually through mist. Not clear enough to identify. Only outlines. Helmets. Long coats. Rifles hanging at their sides. Silent except for the sound of marching. One witness described them as pale. Another insisted they appeared ordinary. Memory changed depending on who told the story years later. That often happens with extraordinary events. But one detail remained consistent. No one claimed the soldiers noticed the village. They marched as though trapped inside another time. Another winter. Another war. Repeating a journey toward somewhere they never reached. Then something stranger occurred. The marching stopped. Instantly. Not fading. Not slowing. Stopped. Complete silence swallowed everything. Even wind seemed absent. Witnesses later described an overwhelming feeling of pressure, as if the air itself had changed. And according to some accounts, the figures vanished. Not walking away. Gone. Leaving only darkness. No tracks appeared afterward despite fresh snow. No camps. No evidence. Morning arrived normally. Birds returned. Life continued. Yet conversations about that night spread quietly. Some insisted it proved spirits remained on battlefields. Others rejected that entirely. Perhaps unusual weather conditions carried sounds from military exercises miles away. Perhaps fear distorted perception. Human minds are powerful. Expectation changes what people believe they see. Historians studying battlefield legends often argue communities preserve trauma through stories. Repeated suffering becomes folklore. Folklore becomes accepted memory. But folklore rarely disappears. Because deep down people wonder, what happens to places after extreme violence? Do they simply recover? Or does something linger? Across Europe, abandoned WW2 sites still attract paranormal investigators. Most find nothing. A few report experiences difficult to explain. Whispers, apparitions, feelings of dread. Yet skeptics point out something important. Battlefields contain history so overwhelming that imagination fills silence. Standing where thousands died changes perception. Fear becomes easier. Normal sounds become extraordinary. Still, not every witness was searching for mystery. Some were ordinary people caught unexpectedly in unusual moments. That is why stories survive. Because witnesses insist they experienced something before believing such things possible. Years after the alleged village encounter, travelers continued reporting strange sounds near forests linked to WW2 combat. Marching, engines, gunfire, always war, always repeating, as though history echoed through darkness. Scientists studying acoustic phenomena discovered weather sometimes bends sound over long distances. Temperature inversions can create strange effects. Voices travel unexpectedly. Engines appear nearby despite originating far away. Could this explain everything? Perhaps. Yet, explanations often struggle against emotion. People remember how experiences felt, and fear feels real regardless of cause. The old man from the village offered another theory before dying. Not ghosts. Not spirits. Memories. He believed catastrophic events somehow marked places forever, like scars invisible to human eyes. He reportedly said, maybe suffering leaves impressions, and sometimes we hear them. Nobody knew what he meant, but those words survived, passed between generations. Because humans fear one possibility above all, that terrible moments never truly end. That somewhere, they continue, repeating, waiting, and on certain cold nights, the forests remember. Today the forests look peaceful. Tourists walk paths once crossed by frightened young soldiers carrying rifles through snow. Birds nest where artillery exploded. Trees grow over trenches. Nature heals, at least on the surface, because beneath calm landscapes lie stories impossible to erase. Every battlefield contains two histories. The documented one, dates, troop movements, casualties, strategies, and another history survives beside it. Whispers, legends, experiences shared quietly between people who live nearby. History records wars ending. Legends sometimes disagree. The stories surrounding haunted WW2 battlefields remain controversial for one reason. Evidence rarely exists. Only testimony, memory, emotion, and those things change over time. A witness becomes older. Details shift. Fear grows. What began as confusion transforms into certainty. Researchers know this. Memory is imperfect, yet imperfect memories still shape human history. Think about soldiers returning home after war. Many carried invisible wounds. Trauma followed them for decades. Nightmares, flashbacks, sounds triggering terror years later. For survivors, war often never ended. So perhaps communities surrounding battlefields experience something similar. Not paranormal hauntings, historical hauntings. Places saturated with grief. Generations raised among ruins. Children hearing stories from parents who survived unimaginable winters. Fear becoming inheritance. And inheritance becoming legend. That alone is powerful enough to create ghosts. Not supernatural ghosts. Human ones. The kind built for memory. Because memory refuses disappearance. Still, questions remain. Why do similar reports emerge repeatedly from unrelated witnesses? Why marching? Why soldiers? Why always war? Coincidence? Expectation? Psychology? No single answer explains everything. That uncertainty keeps stories alive. Humans are drawn toward mysteries without conclusions. A solved mystery ends. An unsolved one survives forever. Perhaps that explains why wartime ghost stories endure long after survivors vanish. The need to believe sacrifices mattered. The need to imagine the dead were not simply forgotten. In some strange way, legends keep people alive. A nameless soldier lost in snow becomes part of stories told decades later. Someone remembers, even through myth. Maybe especially through myth. The forests of the Ardennes no longer witness tanks advancing. No aircraft scream overhead. No commanders issued desperate orders through freezing darkness. Silence returned. But silence is complicated, because sometimes silence allows old echoes to emerge. And echoes can sound alive. Imagine standing alone near an abandoned battlefield after sunset. Wind moving through trees. The world completely still. Then, far away, you think you hear something. A rhythm. Steady. Repeated. Boots. Perhaps only branches shifting. Perhaps imagination. Or perhaps your mind connecting with stories heard long ago. Would you investigate? Would you walk toward darkness? Most people say yes while sitting safely at home. Real fear changes answers. That may explain why witnesses stay distant. Some mysteries survive because nobody wants proof badly enough. And perhaps that is fortunate, because history already contains enough horrors without adding new ones. One truth remains undeniable. Places remember, not literally, but culturally, emotionally, through stories passed from one generation to another. Battlefields become warnings, symbols, memorials. The world changes, yet their meaning survives. Maybe the marching soldiers reported by witnesses were never ghosts at all. Maybe they represented something else. A reminder. That war never disappears completely. Its consequences continue long after victory celebrations end. Long after monuments rise. Long after survivors are buried. Wars echo. Inside families. Countries. Landscapes. And sometimes, inside stories told beside fires on cold nights. So if someone claims they heard marching through old WW2 forests, you do not need to believe in ghosts. Only in memory. Because memory can be powerful enough to sound like an approaching army. And perhaps that is more unsettling than spirits. The idea that humanity repeats suffering. Again and again. Until someone remembers enough to stop. The war ended decades ago. History says so. But on certain winter nights, according to legends whispered near forgotten battlefields, the soldiers are still marching, and the forest still listens.